Yeah, I get it. I get that completely. Let's have a look, see if we are going live. And we will head over there. Let's have a look. Yeah, that is telling us we are live. Somewhere in the world, we are definitely live. Let's go to that part there. We're just going to hit on the live. Go there. Yep, we are there. Definitely live. Good. Right, we will close that down because we don't need to see that. All I need to focus on is yourself. Don't worry with the visuals. I think when it's actually recorded, because it has gone a little bit pixelated. I don't know if you see that, but as
Not
I
for
sort
me, no.
good. Anyway, when it's uploaded to cloud, it will look crystal clear. But
But
okay, 3, 2, 1. Delighted, Kieran Tudor. Welcome on to the How to Cut It podcast, mate.
pleasure to be here. Yeah, lovely to talk to you, Dom, as always.
Yeah, third time lucky, Kieran. So
Yeah,
we got that. Kieran, look, I've got to be honest. What a career journey you've had. I mean, I got to know of you back as you were former British hairdressing newcomer of the year,
yeah, yeah,
international education. You've worked backstage at London, Milan, Paris Fashion Weeks, but also a really special thing is that you were the co-founder of Centered Inside Out Method, which is an award-winning hair growth supplements systems, and we're going to learn all about that. And you know, it's an impressive journey, and I think in a career where many people sort of think, well, where can I go on this career? But I want you to kick me off actually by almost recalling what was one of the biggest, boldest risks you've ever took early in your career that's ultimately led you to where you are today.
amazing. Yeah, a great place to start. So I think it would have to be making the decision to first move down to London, which was back in 2009. So I'd been working as a hairdresser for since I was 16, and this was the age of 21. And at the time, I was very much a home bird. Very tight knit family. Come from a family of hairdressers and grew up in Chester, which is my hometown. Um, but my now other half, and at the time my girlfriend Laura, was down in London for university. She came down straight after school, after sixth form, and so we had a year of kind of long distance relationship, and she was studying fashion, and so I kind of quickly realised she's not coming back to Chester anytime soon. So if I want to make this work, I'm going to have to make the bold move myself, and I'm so grateful that I did. It really opened a lot of doors. It pushed me completely out of my comfort zone. I guess I'd missed out, like a lot of hairdressers do, on that kind of university experience. Like, I still lived at home when I was doing my training, and I guess had it kind of comfortable in a way. I think we're lucky as hairdressers that you kind of you're earning as you're learning with an apprenticeship. So I kind of had this quite safe environment. But yeah, that was the very first big bold decision I made to move down to London, and it really set the tone for the rest of my career from that point, really.
So where did you kick off with your training?
So I'm from Andrew Collins, the kind of very amazing and like foundational training of Andrew Collins, which is based in Liverpool, and they had a salon in Chester, and so yeah, we had a great group. It was Tom Connell, who's now international creative director for Davines, Alfie Booth, who's now also it was also at Trevor Sorbet. So some great names, and around that time it was really great training, and had a great apprenticeship, and yeah, sort of earned my stripes there, qualified, started working in the Chester salon, and never looked back. So yeah, that was my route right at the beginning.
Tell me about that Newcomer of the Year award. I mean, that's an achievement in itself. what led you to sort of
Yeah.
entering the wars, and yeah, what was that experience like for you to win that there, Kieran?
Oh, just absolutely like, I guess, yeah, like completely life changing because at that time I was so immersed in, the industry and the awards and, kind of the creative side of that. And I was very fortunate that when I moved down to London, I was looking for, I guess, a home that I could. Well, it was quite interesting because a lot of the time when you do move into London, you have to retrain in Varda, which was quite a difficult thing to have had to do at the time because I'd already been earning as a stylist a wage. So to go back to kind of like a training wage and live in London at the same time was kind of impossible in a way. So I was very fortunate. Like I come from as I said, a family history of hairdressing, and my dad worked for Weller for many, many years. So he was able to give me a sort of collection of salons that would be great to work from and that would help to like progress my career, but I didn't necessarily need to go back to the beginning and train again. And so where I ended up landing was at D&J Ambrose out in Pinner, just outside London. And that was turned out to be like the perfect environment to kind of start to hone my creative vision. And Darren obviously had been kind of very well known in the avant-garde category in the British Hairdressing Awards, and then later went on to be nominated for British Hairdresser of the Year. But just really had that drive and passion for creating really beautiful work, but really kind of groundbreaking and boundary pushing work as well. So I was kind of quickly immersed into that environment, which was so exciting to me. And after I joined the salon in 2009, I won Newcomer of the Year in 2012. So it was quite, it was only a few years after being with the company. So I was really lucky that they supported me and gave me that opportunity. But yeah, it was just really learning and like honing my sort of skill. And it was weird, like I had the vision for the collection that I created for like, I'd say at least a year leading up to entering the awards. So when that came to life, it was that was the moment. We're seeing the pictures the first time, when you get them back. That was the moment we're like, oh, whatever happens, I've created something that I've really, really proud of. But then winning it is a whole new experience on the night. It's such a buzz, and it obviously opened a lot of doors afterwards as well. So yeah, really grateful for that.
What did it do for you personally in your career, Kieran, winning that awards? Did it actually change anything? Because, people enter it with a hope that it's going to bring new opportunities.
Yeah, and I think it definitely does. I mean, it gives you obviously a credibility. It's certainly, you can kind of say that you're an award-winning hairdresser. I think that's great, and it has a certain recognition to it. I think there's probably it maybe doesn't open as many doors as you think it might at times, but it's certainly helped my career um, in terms of later down the line, the types of brands that I was able to work with, just raising your profile in general. So I think it still is and will always be a great way of just getting exposure. And but I think the way to see it and the way that I learned to see what entering awards is really just for your own kind of creative outlet, really. It obviously does help you in your career massively, but I think the goal for me doing it was just having the ability to create something like a collection of work, and to showcase it in such a way to the industry and to your peers. But yeah, it was quite a pivotal thing, and it just meant that off the back of that we sort of built some momentum. And I think, at the time, D&J Ambrose was nurturing like a young artistic team, and it really kind of just lit the fire for us to kind of create more amazing work as well.
What personal ambition did you have?
Well, back then, it was just being the best hairdresser that I could be. I think just a really kind of foundational level. Like I was very, very driven in many ways. Like I could, my career could have gone in many different directions, and there was always a kind of desire to like have my own salon one day, or kind of educate and kind of all those things. And I guess I've been fortunate that I've got to do a bit of everything in many ways. And I think that's the thing. Even for me, having a background in hairdressing, I didn't even know that there's so many avenues you could go down within the industry. But yeah, for me, like I say, it was just to be just to get better and better and put out really, really good work, really.
Yeah, and we mentioned that you worked on some of the major fashion weeks around Europe. What was that like, and how did you get involved in those?
It was great, great. I mean, it was an amazing experience, and I think again, it gives you just a whole new level of different skills. Like learning to work in that sort of environment is just it can be very intense. It can be a bit clicky. I certainly found that at times in the fashion editorial world. But I was really, really fortunate that I got in with a great team, and that was through a connection through Weller. Really, like I was on the Weller Generation Now team. And one of our mentors was Gary Gill, and so I kind of had that connection with Gary. And actually, Tom Wright, who was Gary Gill's first assistant for many, many years, has now just gone out on his own. He's also from Chester. We were in the Generation Now team together, and I think that was how I'd sort of got my kind of connection to join Gary's team. So it was for a couple of seasons I was sort of in amongst it and Gary's team, and just an incredible hairdresser to work alongside. And that team in particular, out of other teams that I'd worked on, was just a really good group of people, and they were doing like really great hair. So yeah, I loved those experiences. I think you really have to really want to do be in session if to kind of make it. And I have so much admiration for people that stick it out, because it's tough. Like, you don't get paid for the majority of the work that you do in session hairdressing, and you really have to kind of have that desire to want to kind of make it in as a session hair stylist in many ways. For me, I found that, as I say, the balance of kind of a commerciality, like blending kind of like the kind of work that you can do with how you can sustain a living, I guess shaped my career in a way. And it was a sort of pivotal time that when I was doing this sort of session work, and I was potentially really getting really head first into it, I was also approached by a brand, which is Remington, to be a kind of ambassador for them. And that was a completely different world in many ways. It was very commercial, very consumer hairdresser, like consumer facing brand. But it was also really great opportunity, and actually really enjoyed the type of work that I was doing there, which was kind of bringing that editorial style of work, but kind of like diluting it and diffusing it into the kind of consumer world. But also just the teams that you worked with when you're working on commercial shoots were generally just a lot more friendly, and you got paid on time and things like that. So I think that's what sort of shaped it for me. And I still loved kind of doing the odd sort of editorial job when I could take it. But the fact that I wasn't doing it as a kind of standalone career was kind of more interesting in kind of blending the two.
Something that I just want to go back to that I picked up on, you talked about your Weller generation now, which, for a lot of brands have, it's effectively, they're almost mentorship, aren't they? That you're getting mentored, to really refine the hairstylist that you are. How important would you say that is for our listener to consider getting mentors to help shape your journey and your learnings in the industry?
I think it's absolutely massive, and I would take any opportunity available to me, and that's the advice I would give to any young hairdressers listening. And that's what's great about our industry, is that there are so many of those kind of opportunities. So definitely put yourself full into it, because the beauty of those sorts of things is generally it's a year, and you get exposed to a whole variety of amazing kind of industry leaders in a way. So it's a very unique opportunity to be able to absorb lots of different kind of skill sets and mindsets and techniques. So yeah, that would be my advice, is to kind of look what's out there and really go for it. I had some amazing experiences, through the Fame team, trying to get into the Fame team and getting very close to that, and being part of Generation Now and all that sort of thing. It was just, it can be competitive, but it just sort of it just fuels your ambition and your desire, really. And it's all a learning curve, whether you get through or not. You're kind of putting yourself out there, you're networking, and it's the only way that we can kind of improve, I think.
Yeah, I love that. You know, what comes through straight away just listening to your journey is your complete passion. You've really engulfed yourself into the industry and obviously surrounded, yeah, yeah, in your family by the industry, but the ambition that's there. And I want it really to lead into, you know, you co-founding your own brand, your own hair care range, which is absolutely incredible. And yeah, I've got to learn to that. But before I understand that, I want to understand how you are positioned as a hairstylist. So, you know, did you remain at D&J Ambrose? Did you go off, and what did that lead to for you? How did you go off and work as a hair artist?
Yeah, so I had an amazing time at Dean Jambos. I was there for 7 years, and then in 2016, had a lot of life changes. We sort of moved home. Me and my wife Laura got married, and I decided to go full time freelance at the time and kind of just sort of go. That's where I was talking about where I was in the session sort of world. It was kind of my desire to immerse myself in it. I was thinking if I'm going to make it in the in this sort of world, it's really difficult to just book assisting jobs on a Monday, which is the only technically your only day off other than a Sunday, working 5 days a week in the salon behind the chair. So I thought I'm going to make the decision to do it, and so that was probably the second biggest leap I made in my career, and I went full time freelance, and that at the beginning meant I wasn't doing a lot. It was like, oh well, don't have clients. I was just putting myself out there with a lot of um, the kind of streeters of the world and the CLMs of the world. The kind of artist management companies. So I was registering as an assistant, and I was just kind of taking jobs that I could do, doing free editorials and things like that. But then what I'd kind of another connection that I'd had through the Weller days was Josh Wood, who's an amazing hair colorist and owner of the Josh Wood Atelier in Holland Park. So I reached out to Josh, and because we had that connection through, I worked with Darren on shoots, all over the world really, but places like Paris and New York, and got to know Josh. So I'd kind of reached out to say, I've moved on and I'm kind of doing this session work, but I didn't really know a lot about the Josh Wood Atelier. It's kind of that sort of elusive place that it's you don't really know what goes on behind the kind of behind the closed doors in a way. So I was just interested to know what it was like because I'd heard that it was an environment for sort of independent hairstylists. So, as I say, reached out, and then that led to Josh offering me a place to work. Maybe whether that was flexible, 1 or 2 days a week. And so that's what I began doing. I had a base then, 2 days a week at the atelier, and had to start from scratch. Obviously, as many hairdressers know, anytime you move on from your salon that you've been with for a long time, it's just going back to the drawing board with clients. And obviously, a lot of my clientele was based in Pinner, which is like northwest London, and then now I was based in myself in Notting, in the heart of Notting Hill. So I did have some clients that followed when they found out where I was eventually, but it was just starting again. But because it was only those 2 days, it was a completely different experience for me to have a base 2 days a week, and to be able to see clients, but then have time then the rest of the week to take on jobs, whether that was in fashion or commercials or whatever really. So yeah, that's how my career sort of changed. And then I ended up being with Josh for 7 years, which was all throughout COVID. So it was a kind of I felt like a time that was accelerated because 2020 hit, and then it's all in times taken on a whole new meaning in many ways. Um, but it was a really, I loved. It was such a completely different environment being in the atelier, in the respect that the type of clients that came in there are the kind of movers and shakers of the world. They're the celebrities, they're the high flyers, the executives, very wealthy clientele. So it was a completely different environment for me to kind of to grow into. And I met some incredible people there, still in touch with a lot of people. But it again opened a lot of doors, and was a great, early way of working differently, and this more like the industry's progressed into this more very much independent working scenario. So yeah, so that's how it sort of all changed, I would say. And during that time is when, as I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute, what led to, well, that was the time that we created our brand, if you like. So I was very fortunate in that I was in an environment where Josh also was allowing me to create something as well, which I think is really, again, quite unique, because Josh has his own brand, and one of his stylists creating their own brand, for him to kind of be okay and collaborate on that was a really, I took a lot of mentorship from him, and very grateful for that as well.
I think that's an interesting point that you just raised there, Kieran, is that you're working independently in this space with Josh, and Josh has got his own product range, and he's comfortable for you to maybe embracing your own thing. I think that's important, in a landscape that is very much about the independent hairdressers and working in collaborative spaces, call it what you want.
Yeah.
But I think that's something maybe for a salon owner to always consider, isn't it? Even if you may be employed, how much we should allow people to grow different sidelines to their career. Is that something we should be considering more?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. Ultimately, if you are that salon owner, that how is this going to not cause a conflict? And I totally get that. It's a tricky. It can be a tricky thing to navigate. But I think if you're a salon owner, or a co-creative space owner, and you've got ambitious people in your team, it kind of really adds to the whole. Um, it kind of creates a bigger thing if you're allowing people to kind of fully express themselves, rather than saying there's a limit to what you can do, because people inevitably do move on, and anyway. But I think that, ultimately, the long run, if you have the ability to allow other people to flourish within your environment, it's gonna benefit you in the long run as well. That's what
Yeah,
that's what my
I
take
agree.
on it.
I just think it's maybe something we need to because look, we hear lots of doom and gloom in the industry, but equally, I hear lots of amazing, positive, uplifting stories, and
Yeah.
kind of, and I feel like we've got to harness different ways of actually how it looks. And I just wonder, if you do have an employed model, how we can be a little bit more flexible in allowing your team to have maybe side paths and side things that could just sit alongside being employed, that allows that creative freedom of a stylist while still in an employed model. I don't know. It's just think I think maybe we've got to start to reinvent, because it's clearly not working right now, is it? From an employed model, and you talk to independent hairstylists, they seem to be very ambitious, want their own brands and their own identity, which leads me into you creating a brand, and I know that this happened during lockdown, didn't it? During the COVID period, 2020. Am I right in saying centered?
Hmm.
Yeah, it was really inspired by your wife's own hair loss journey, Laura. Maybe you could just tell
That's
us
right.
about this, how this all happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it actually went back to, I guess, the roots of it being in 2017, was when Laura had quite a severe amount of hair loss, which was as a result of stress and burnout. She was working in the fashion industry, and had her own studio in Mayfair, where she was making hats. And it was a very really stressful job. Um, in that, it was really only her that was creating all these beautiful handmade pieces. And millinery, which is the art of making hats, is a dying trade, and for, I guess, obvious reasons, that it's it can take as long as a week to make one hat. And people are reluctant to spend as much as it on it as something like a bag or something like that, that's often made overseas and imported in. So it's one of them really kind of crafts, if you like. And she had such a passion for it, and did it for many, many years. But the business side of it really drained her creativity. And I think, just like many people do, like we all have done, probably in your sort of 20s, and you sort of burning the candle at both ends, not really looking after yourself fully. Kind of her it all was sort of stemming from her desire to succeed in many ways, and she really wanted to be the best that she could. But it ultimately took its toll, like skipping meals and working really late, and just the stress of that and the burden of running the business, which was really difficult to make any money in, kind of just caught up with her, and she burnt out. It was a classic burnout story. Her nervous system was fried. She just eventually closed down her brand that she'd built for many years. And the stress of that sort of took its toll and manifested eventually in hair loss, because as what can often happen with like a stress related hair loss, it doesn't happen straight away. There's often this sort of delayed onset. And so after about 3 months after her closing her business down, she started to notice really severe hair loss, like clumps of hair coming out. And she, of course, would come to me, being a hairdresser, to say, "What the hell's going on? I've got heaps of hair in my hand, like freaking out," and looking to me for reassurance. And that's what really hit home to me, how emotionally impactful hair loss is for someone. Because I've been used to seeing clients with hair loss for a variety of reasons, but in a salon, you only see them every sort of 8 weeks. And you give them the advice, go to the GP, and start using these products and things like that. But you're not seeing them every day. You're not seeing that kind of emotional stress of like, my hair's falling out, what do I do? So that was the very starting point of the journey for us, to kind of start to recover Laura's hair. And it was a long journey, but yeah, that's where it began back in 2017, as I say. And then it was a case of, I guess for us, it was a case of like getting to the bottom of what was going on. Like, I guess, I think any brand really is a outward extension of the people behind it. That is definitely the case of what Scented is for me and Laura. It's really just us in a kind of brand form, and our kind of DNA as people is very much to get to the kind of nitty gritty and the roots of and the root cause of things. So when this happened, it was actually, we see it as a very positive thing, because it was a wake up call for Laura that something was out of balance. We found it fascinating in a way that something emotional, like an emotional trigger, could cause a physical issue like this. And so that's what, as I say, started the journey for us to start doing a lot of research and to starting to recover her hair.
So when you done your research, what did you come up with?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, it's not really stopped, to be honest. But yeah, I think what became apparent is that a lot, really. Two things I'd like to start off by saying is that a lot of people will find this, if they've gone through a similar journey, is that you can feel quite helpless in this situation. And the type of hair loss that Laura had is temporary hair loss. It's called telogen effluvium. So it's the type of hair loss that is temporary, providing the root cause is kind of addressed. And in Laura's case, it was stress and burnout. So technically, if you address that, then the hair will recover slowly anyway. But what was abundantly clear is that a GP, for example, which is what Laura's the first point of call was, to kind of check for any underlying issues. The GPs just aren't equipped to kind of deal with and care for people in this sort of situation, because you're very easily and quickly sent away as being completely normal. Everything's fine,
That's right.
completely normal. After a blood test as well, which is quite interesting in itself, because when your blood test comes back from the GP and the NHS blood test results, the range for each kind of nutrient is very broad. So if you are right down at the bottom of that range and say borderline, it will say you're normal. Everything's normal, blood test normal, but it's definitely not optimal. It's like anything but optimal. And the interesting thing about that is things that we found from our research is that in many countries, the levels for things like B12 and iron and things like that, the range is much narrower. So technically in the UK, you'd be deficient, right? So I think that's what showed you that there's a kind of gap in the net for people that are falling through, having this issue, and not able to address the root cause. And that, for me and for us, what we found was that the the most important thing for someone like that is nutrition and scalp health. You know, two things that were at the time quite underserved in our industry. You had hair nutrition companies, but there was a lot of flaws with them in terms of the formulations. They weren't necessarily very clean. They had a lot of bulking agents and synthetic versions of the ingredients. And then you had scalp care brands that had been around for a long time, but they were a bit more kind of clinical looking. They weren't necessarily talking to someone that was like Laura, who's, young for having hair loss. And so that's what we became quickly aware of, that this sort of thing didn't exist. And what we'd started to do, based on our research, was to start recovering Laura's hair using a supplement, and then using like a scalp oil and massage, because that's what I'd always been telling her. You need to, massage your scalp and stimulate blood flow. So we got into this little routine, and that is now what is referred to as the inside out method, and it's just a very, very simple strategy or protocol for hair health and hair recovery, which is a case of taking a hair supplement and using a topical scalp treatment. It's the combination of the two which got results. It took a long time, because hair recovery does take some time, but it works. And Laura's hair, thankfully, is better than it ever was pre her having hair loss. So yes, that's a lot of the information that we
No, it's
found, and
it's it's,
a lot
it's
more.
brilliant. I mean, look, hair loss is a huge issue, and I think but thankfully we're starting to understand it more. But I think one of the most common misconceptions as a hairdresser myself, when a client talks about hair loss, Kieran, is that they will automatically think it's the hair. You cut it, and the hair is almost dead, isn't it? It's everything, as you say, inside, hence the inside out method.
Yeah,
I'm guessing that's what Centered is really focusing on, isn't it? It's everything that's going on with our own health for healthy hair growth.
yeah, absolutely. Like, I totally agree, and I've had, even hairdressers that are like surprised that, oh yeah, it's not the hair, is it? It's the root. Hair technically is dead. Past the follicle, it's just kind of a collection of keratin and cells, really. And so the way I like to talk about it in an analogy sense is like, if you had a garden and you had flowers and plants in your garden, and you were going out there and looking at the flowers that were wilting and, like, a bit tired, and all you ever did was look, prune the petals and, spritz the leaves and things like that, and you neglected the soil, eventually
That's
those
right.
those flowers will kind of wilt and die. And that seemed to me at the time that that's what our industry and a lot of the hair salons that well, the hair salons I worked in, and a lot of the salons in the industry were portraying. We had all these products for hair, but nothing that was about the growth of healthy hair. So that is essentially everything that Centered is about. We target the inside out.
So, here you are. You sound incredibly up on the science behind this. Is that naturally something that's always been with you, or how have you gone about understanding this more? Have you gone out of your way to really learn this that maybe wasn't there 10, 15 years ago?
I think it's just been a natural part of our journey. Obviously, we had a very when I talk about this, it makes it sound like it's all a very quick process, and it of course wasn't. You're talking like the process of recovering Laura's hair was like a good year really before we'd even considered, a brand or anything like that. And we never really intended to create a brand. It was something that sort of naturally come about. But as I say, it's an outward reflection of who we are as people. And yeah, digging deeper, I suppose, is something that's a bit more embedded in who I am, and certainly who Laura is, but also tied with the fact that centered, and that whole journey was really a journey for Laura of understanding how to look after herself as well, and really going back to basics and learning that.
Just take me back then to that moment that the idea you thought, right, we know that this is missing. There's not this out there. There's not these correct vitamins, the best vitamins for hair growth. When was it that you thought, right, we're going to launch a brand here? Because there will be many people out there, including I'm sure our listener, who could be interested in a brand,
Mm.
but that is not an easy or you know, you need a few quid behind you, I'm guessing, to go and do this. Tell me how you went about launching this brand centered.
Well, it was again a long process, and I it's fully it's Laura and mine, our baby in many ways. I mean, we've got a 7-month-old baby now, but this was definitely our first baby. And so again, like I suppose Laura's background, it's really a combination of both of our skill sets. Obviously, my background is in hairdressing. Laura's was in design and fashion, but she had this personal experience. And it was Laura that had this. I guess she's got that entrepreneurial spark. I mean, going right back to the beginning, when the idea was formulating for creating products, Laura kind of actually pitched the idea to me, and she just was like, I think for her, she'd gone on this hair loss journey and recovered it. She was feeling more confident in herself, and she was talking to people about it because it's a kind of taboo subject, especially for younger people. And she was hearing that a lot of people were experiencing it too, but she went from sort of feeling alone about it to suddenly feeling really supported in this sort of community. And so I think a light bulb moment went off for her that she was in the right place at the right time. There's also like a kind of there was a segue in her career where after she shut down her business, she went into kind of a trend forecasting role for a company called Mintel. And so at the same time of her having this real hair loss issues, she was producing reports and analyzing kind of the beauty industry and seeing that the interest in vegan hair care was growing, and hair loss trends and things like this. So it just, I suppose, felt like she was in exactly the right place at the right time. And when she pitched it to me, I was like, hang on a minute, you've just closed down a business, you've had hair loss, you're in a good place now. Like, this sounds like a lot of work, and I guess for me it was all the rational mind of like, why would we be able to create a hair care company, and this and that, and that's interesting because that's coming from a place of fear, and I've been on my own journey with that. But that was, I suppose, the starting point. And Laura's a very, very driven and entrepreneurial spirited person. So when she doesn't see that as an obstacle, she was just like, oh yeah, we'll just figure out how to do it and we'll do it, and taking those steps. And it literally hasn't stopped since then. We've just been
Yeah.
immersed in wanting to know, the best, sourcing the best ingredients, sourcing the best manufacturers, sourcing the best materials and packaging and everything. And yeah.
I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, I'm actually just in front of me. I've got your, we'recentered.com, the site, and it's everything about centered for me is beautifully presented. And you're in some high end department stores as well, aren't you, Kieran? And to be in some of these is, is, yeah, you got to have a beautiful product that ends with a beautiful role. And there's a lot here. There's a lot, lots of vitamins. We've got organic, original hair vitamins. We've got scalp oils.
Mhm.
I mean, where did you start with this? Though? I mean, did you suddenly go in and think, right, we need a key one or two products to start centered, or did you
Mhm.
go in and think, right, well, we've got to launch a whole range here, because coming with that in packaging and product development, I mean, this is not cheap to get saying what you've got here.
No, I think it's sort of like one of Laura's like superpowers is she's just a researcher by her nature. So she just went deep dive into finding, sourcing everything, and just figuring out, like, solving problems, which is a lot about what building a brand is about. It's problem solving, really. Um, but we developed and launched with 5 products in the kind of essence that we created a range that you can use as a complete collection for hair recovery and hair health. Well, hair loss prevention as well as recovery. But that was initially just the original hair vitamin, which is obviously the tablet for the inside, our scalp pre-wash oil treatment, which is something that you'd use once or twice a week for the scalp topically, and then our Daily Calmer shampoo and conditioner, which is very repair based and restorative, and then our Unwind primer, which is kind of like the post wash, sealing, heat protector, and sort of protein spray. So it was like we launched with a collection that you could, if someone was having this problem of hair loss, this is a collection and a method that they could take, and it was going to restore their hair vitality, basically.
What feedback did you get quite early on to the products that you had developed from those that were using it?
Well, right back at the beginning, so as Laura's hair loss journey started in 2017. Of course, we didn't launch until 2020, and we launched in February 2020, and were then in lockdown in March. So it was a really interesting time. It had taken us like 18 months to develop the products and get everything ready. We had this big launch and planned to do events and things like that. Of course, all of that was out the window. So we very quickly had to figure out like how do we be online. Like we were obviously online anyway, but it was like everyone had to do everything online. So we were able to sort of have quite an interactive experience with our customers straight away, where I was personally offering people like consultations, like 15-minute consultations, like online. So we'd just have Zoom consultations with customers that were having issues. And back then people loved it because we were locked down anyway. So it was like, this was great that I can get advice. And I think it was an interesting time because one of the most like longed for services was hair, wasn't it, when people were unable to go to the salon. So that was quite interesting. We were able to kind of serve people in that way. But hair results take time. So it wasn't until several months after launching that we started to get these this feedback. My hair's improving, like hair density is improving and things like that. Plus, it was also an interesting time that people were experiencing hair loss as a result of COVID as well, which is common. Anytime you've had an illness, you can have excess hair shedding because of the way it affects the hair growth cycle. So we started to build this bank of results. People that had gone from having quite severe hair loss for whatever reason it was, and we were able to see sort of before and afters of the products working. So that was a really amazing moment. Obviously, when you put a product out there and it's your baby, and we tested it for 18 months anyway, but to see then the real life results was like, yeah, just so rewarding. Um, and
Because
then we
that's
started.
got to be key, hasn't it, for this type of hair care, scalp care. Yeah, you've really got to get results.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I think it's like a lot of these things, you don't get the benefit unless you use them. But I feel like this is what is the missing link for a lot of people's hair care routines, really. And it comes back to education, and that is the kind of direction and the um, that's our mission now. We really want to support hairdressers. So if there's people out there listening that are interested, and maybe because what we found is there is a bit of a knowledge gap between what we learn as hairdressers in our training around the topic of hair loss, which is kind of you get your modules on hair anatomy and things like that, but no one's interested in that. We just want to learn how to cut hair and style hair beautifully.
I think
And it's
that's
only
changing now. I think people are getting more interested in this stuff, Kieran.
I totally agree, and I think what that what, what I'm referring to is that was my journey that I went on. I'm sure people will agree
Mm.
with that, but it's
Yeah, same.
interesting that we are in this time, and I'm so grateful that we're in this time. That I think for many reasons, because of society and the broadest spectrum, people are more interested in hair health and overall well-being and wellness. Let's be, but there is still this knowledge gap, let's say. So that is where we've been really supporting as much as we can with education, that's digitally or in-person events, and just really trying to support and empower hairdressers to feel more confident around this topic, really, for many reasons, because, it's important that we keep this within the industry and we are the experts when it comes to hair health. And if not, our clients are going to come to us as the expert. And if we're not able to kind of give them the right advice, they're just going to go to Boots, or they're going to go to Look Fantastic, or online, or whatever, really. So I think it's a really key moment that we can kind of upskill and just support our clients in the best way.
So when you talk about education, what does that education look like to a hairdresser?
Well, from what we offer, we basically have built like a digital suite of education, which is videos on our products. We also run what we call workshops. I mean, we call it the Understanding Hair Loss Workshop, which is essentially myself and Laura, and we pop up in different locations around the UK, and we just have like a 2-hour immersive workshop where we're inviting hairdressers. It's completely free, and what we do is we just obviously do a lot of product knowledge training, but we just go through a kind of booklet that we give to people, and it's just like how to identify the most common types of hair loss in the salon, how to talk to your clients about it, what's the right kind of wording to use, what's the right solutions that are going to help them, whether it's androgenic alopecia or menopausal hair loss or whatever it is. How can you equip yourself to better kind of serve your clients, and we've been having amazing
How do we
results.
better equip ourselves then, Kieran?
I think it always comes back to knowledge, and when you have more knowledge on a topic, you feel more confident about it. But without that knowledge, you're not able to advise. So from what people can get from us, as I say, we run these events. We've got several coming up. We've got one in Sassoons in Manchester in June. We've got one in Edinburgh on the 9th of June, and they're just free events. We'll be doing many more. And then what we're also doing is launching more in-depth day-long courses, and that's with our ambassador, who's a lady called Bridgine King, and is actually a registered trichologist and a hair loss expert. And that will be more in depth. That will be where people can kind of come away from a day's kind of education, and with a real understanding of how to not only support their clients, but how to kind of tap into an untapped revenue stream in their business, whether that's from offering scalp services, using a trico scope, things like that. But yeah, so that is
Because
what.
that's sometimes what a client is wanting, isn't it? There's no doubt about it. I think it's got to be a really strong part of our retail armory, having
Yes.
hair loss
Yeah.
range of products, because I think people will invest in good quality opportunities, of maybe prolonging their hair life, or maybe seeing new
Yeah.
growth. Who knows? I, I'm guessing understanding that as a hairdresser, as a salon owner, is really important, because we have to look at one. We want to offer the empathetic support to our
Yeah.
clients. That's just naturally what we want to do. But at the
Yeah.
back of our minds, we want to raise our own professionalism and
Hmm.
offer, but equally, we want to put more money into the till, or maybe commission. So it's really
Yeah.
vital, isn't it, that we understand this and have a range here to be able to support.
Yeah. And like, even if it's not, well, yeah, that's just, it's a different way of saying that if you're not doing that, then that money is being spent elsewhere, and there's a lot of kind of traps that you can fall down, that clients will inevitably fall down with hair loss, where you're easily you're quite vulnerable in that situation, and you'll go online and you'll buy something from Amazon or whatever, and it might be a biotin supplement, which is 10,000 times the recommended dose of biotin, but it's because it's a marketed ingredient. You think you're doing something good, and your client will be taking this, and it's doing absolutely nothing for them. But if you do offer them an effective solution that's professional quality, that's sold in salons, then yeah, the revenue stays with you, it stays in the industry, and you're going to get better results. Clients are going to trust you more for it, because you've helped them in a time that they needed that support.
Yeah, and I think in a time of, when we talk about, all the, rising costs and everything, that we have to be a little bit more creative in how we bring in more revenue into our bag.
100%. Yeah.
And also treatments. I mean,
Yeah.
surely is this, in the centered range, is backwash treatments. Well, I say backwash, that always sounds horrible, but
Yeah.
in salon treatments. I mean, these things that you try and talk about in your education, and to salon owners and to independent hairstylists, that look, this is something you could be doing, and what
Yeah.
could that look like?
Absolutely. I mean, it's been so, like, as I said, we launched in 2020, and back then there wasn't really any talk about scalp health, really, or scalp. There wasn't many scalp products out there, but we really led and launched with our kind of scalp first approach. And one of our hero products is our scalp oil treatment. As I mentioned, it's called the En Route Scalp Oil, and it's an absolutely beautiful product. We're super, super proud of it for many, many reasons. It's been really loved in awards and by press and our customers. But it's a really simple and effective way for salons to tap into that scalp care movement, which is now, 5 years on since we launched, is now such a growing area, and it is set to grow massively over the next sort of 3 to 5 years. The stats on it in terms of the market share is absolutely huge, and you see in the big brands are pivoting to move into that space. So we feel really proud that we were part of that, pioneering that movement. And back to the days that right at the beginning, I was doing scalp massage tutorials and talking about this on a daily basis. But yeah, that's what we really support our salons with, is how you can create a little scalp facial in your salon. Anything from doing an add-on treatment with our oil as a pre-wash treatment where you can charge 20-30 pounds, up to doing like a standalone marketed scalp facial service, and it's a bit longer. You invite your client in for 45 minutes, give them a really beautiful scalp massage, and you put an eye mask on them, and you just really treat them and give them something that's a self-care sort of treat, really. But yeah, it's a beautiful product, and it's a really good revenue booster, because it's something that if you're buying it into the salon, there's often promotions on it, and you can use the product that you get to do services with, and as I say, tap into this trending, growing area, but also offer beautiful services.
I mean, this is a growing market. There's no doubt about it. There's some other key players out there.
Yes.
Why would our listener invest in centered above others, and why do we need centered?
I think we've kind of touched on that already. Like, if you're not kind of offering something like this in your salon, you're really, really missing out. Because as I said, going back to that garden analogy, if we're just offering products that focus on the hair, you're missing on the most important aspect of what hair growth is, and
But
that
why centered?
comes from the inside out. So why centered in terms of hair growth? Because we have hair nutrition, we have scalp care, and our philosophy is something that just goes a little bit deeper than just a product that you're taking. We're education first. We come from hairdressing background, and everything that we have done and put into this brand is just, as I say, it sort of comes from a place of of us, and love and intention, really, and that is choosing. I think our journey through product development has been interesting, because you can see where people will cut corners, and it's easy to choose the cheaper alternative for an ingredient or packaging option, and this is, I suppose, in many ways, a labor of love, in that we've really made the difficult decisions to create something that we would want to use ourselves, and that we felt was missing. So yeah, I think it's sort of, people would choose us because they align with what we're about, and
Yeah.
our mission.
I mean, I couldn't recommend, go and have a look at We're Cent. So I'll say that again. Yeah, go and have a look at wearecentered.com. I mean, it's all on there, isn't it? You've got your hair vitamins, scalp treatments, products by concern. You've got a health hair quiz, hair
Yeah.
health quiz, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, well, a lot of, so the website that you'll see is I suppose more consumer facing. What I would say to our professionals listening is that we have a community which is more professional focused. That's something we have a Facebook group for, but it's something that we're building out a lot more of. So we work with a salon distribution partner, and we're building like a really strong community of professionals. So I would say to follow us on Instagram at We Are Centered,
More
and
professional driven. So what I'm looking at here is tends
yeah,
to be more because that's a little bit
yeah,
of the part of where people say, oh, well, we're selling it in a salon. But I think that's pretty much most professional brands do that. I mean,
yeah,
is this a professional and consumer in terms of where this is stocked, Kieran? Because a lot of
yeah,
people, there is a lot of clash of conflict now of products being sold, in department stores as well as
yeah, yeah.
professional. How do you marry the two where it sits really in a healthy relationship?
Well, I think that we have very much sort of dedicated ourselves to being, the industry first, in terms of like that's the bar, that's setting the bar. So we would never choose to work with a retailer that didn't align with that. Um, Having said that, I think that it's a really interesting time because a lot of the big, not even all the big ones, but a lot of haircut brands are available in Boots now on the high street and in salons. Um,
That's got to be the big thing for any brand, though, isn't it? Really? I mean, I know, professional to it's wonderful, but as a
yeah,
brand, you've got to be looking at your the numbers, getting it out there, and I guess the department stores, Boots, call them what will sell big numbers. So is that the
yeah.
dream of a brand, of a hair care brand?
I think that there's always like, it may be the dream like long term, and I think I suppose it gets directed by your finances and your whoever you, if you've got investors and things like that. But ultimately, I think it's a case that for us, for example, we wouldn't want where it becomes difficult is if you've got an online retailer and they're selling at a real discount, and a salon can't compete with it, from the margin perspective. So what we're trying to do is avoid that and keep it at a certain elevated level. But I think it is just the way that the industry is moving, and just the beauty industry as a whole. It's You can get products everywhere from TikTok now to you know
100%,
I
absolutely.
it's
I mean, we talk about
insane.
department store, yeah, I mean, it's just everywhere. But I think the most important part to all of this, regardless of where things are sold, you want to be really retailing products that you truly believe in, that are offering your value to clients. And clients want to be educated on this. And that's something that department stores and Boots and even online will not be able to do. And I guess that's the edge. I'm guessing your USP as well is the education that you're taking out there and your background that we learnt at the very start, Kieran.
Yeah, this is it, and this is what has been an amazing journey for us in the last 12 months in growing our professional community. We're in about 400 salons now, and growing every single day. And the feedback that we're getting about the education side of things is amazing. And we offer solutions like with our vitamins, our hair supplements. We offer kind of different formulations for different stages of life, let's say. So we have our original vitamins, but then we have menopause specific formula, and we've just launched a pregnancy and postpartum specific formula. We're about to launch a different formula, which I can't sort of announce yet, but that will be the sort of family of formulation, so that you as a salon, as a stylist, if you think of your clientele, you've got a solution for everyone in your clientele, really, at every different stage of life.
Are
Um,
you supporting the independent hairstylist as well?
Oh, absolutely, and that's what's really important to us, because that's me. That I am still an independent stylist. I still see clients once a week, so I very much get that. And so we're definitely not pigeonholed in terms of just being a salon stockist, and you've got a minimum order amount or anything like that. And that's one of the beautiful things about the distribution partner that we're partnered with. They very much support the independent stylist. They help to get in the independent stylists to get them a website, for example, and so they can sell online themselves and take a commission of the sale. And it's amazing, really, because I think that's what a lot of the big brands aren't doing. They're not looking after the independent stylist at the minute. So
And
yeah.
what about you embracing the social media influencer? Or is that something that you're very focused on to promote your brand?
I would say historically no, because it's never felt like it sat well with us at all. Like just the idea of someone, giving someone a product, I'm certainly paying them to tell everyone that it's really good. So we haven't historically done that. I think it's really important to us to build genuine relationships. So we will work with creators and, in quotations, influencers if they've used our products and had results. But that takes time to build those relationships. But what we are finding is that hairdressers are becoming our ambassadors now, not even in a paid sense, just in that they're using the products, they're getting results on our clients, they're tagging us in these results. And that is so much more valuable and beneficial to us than just paying someone to say this product is great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just coming towards the end, I think it's really important to just share with our listener who may be really keen on learning more on the possibilities of retailing centered and getting educated with centered. What's the step that they need to take? to make that happen?
So in our Instagram bio, there's a link to kind of fill out a trade registration form, and that's through our distribution partner, which is Salon Business Solutions. So anyone can kind of click that link, input their details, whether you're a salon owner or an independent stylist, and then someone from the team will be in touch. What we offer then as a brand is that we will work with them on a one-to-one basis to give them support educationally. We can do Zoom education. We'll send them our suite of digital education, product knowledge videos, everything like that. And yeah, just on a very personal level, like if people want to reach out and ask any questions, if they're interested, then just do that, either me personally or through Centered.
And what's
Um,
the Facebook group again? Sorry, Adam.
that's the Centered Pro community.
So that's facebook.com/.
Yes, Centered Pro community.
Okay, we'll put links
Yeah.
into the show notes there. I've got to ask you, are you got sort of regions in other parts of the world as well? Is this pretty much UK and Ireland at the moment? And what's the growth projection of where you want to go with this?
It is predominantly the UK. We do retail over in Australia. We're the retailer over there, and we have retailed directly through ourselves into Europe. But for what we're doing and focusing on, it is the UK and Ireland at the moment. However, that will be part of the strategy, is to kind of replicate the professional channel in Europe, across Europe, and maybe further afield as well. But we don't want to run before we can walk, and we're really enjoying nurturing this community. Like I think I have to say, like, I've loved watching what you've done, which is building an amazing community, and it's certainly what we want to do. But you can only do that on a very personal level without it
Got to be
getting lost.
authentic. I think anything
Yeah,
with communities has to, because I think they've become quite a buzzword of recent years. But I think it's finding your tribe, isn't it? And people that want to
absolutely.
get it.
Yeah.
But what I like about it is, from a hairdresser's point of view, Kieran, is that it's about elevating our career all the time, and it's about always growing our wealth of knowledge. And I say to everybody, this is my biggest tip that I would always say, and I'll say it to the listener about this, is sometimes spend 6 months really focusing in on a particular part of the industry. And I think this sort of health, hair, scalp, hair loss, I think is something you should really focus in on, because it's a
Yeah.
huge market. And if you become a real leader in that, and actually learning how to deal with fine hair as well, because
Mm,
there's a massive market in people with fine hair. And I remember when I brought
yeah.
Mark Blake on, and that's what led him into trichology, because he said he was good at doing people who had fine
Yeah.
hair. And
Yeah.
that's really part. So maybe sometimes as in our niche in our industry, and yeah, maybe that's something that you should be. But look, I'm truly impressed by you, Kieran. Like I said, I've followed you from such a long time, and you're such a nice, humble guy as well, which is no surprise, because I know your brother too is a very humble guy, Adam. And I think you should be very, very proud. Yeah, just kind of one or two questions. How have you found the journey? How are you enjoying this journey with Centered?
It's it's been an absolute journey. There's no other way of describing it. Like, my journey personally has been from going from being a stylist to slowly but surely now immersing myself as, I guess you couldn't really sort of pigeonhole exactly what I'm doing now, because I'm doing everything from driving stock up different
Yeah.
parts of the UK, educating, product
Are you
development.
enjoying that?
I now I'm absolutely loving it, but it's taking time to feel in a place of like I can do it, if that makes sense, because there's so many aspects to what we're doing. It's difficult to feel like you're kind of doing it all well. So yeah, but I've been upskilling like crazy, and I'm actually really really enjoying that now. Like it's taken a lot of perseverance, because ordinarily I'm like the type of person that comes up against some friction in certain things and be like, too hard, I'm going to do something else. But I've really dug in and thought, right, if
Okay.
something needs doing, I'm going to learn how to do it. And I'm absolutely loving it. And like I say, the biggest rewarding thing in the minute is just that we're building these all these salon professionals, work for me, like potentially working with big salon names now, getting our products into salons that I grew up aspiring to potentially work in. So that's the sort of the levels that we're in now. So things like that just are super, super exciting.
And just to last question, and again for our listener, that you've taken us on a beautiful journey. We learned about Centre, but we also learned about you. And I think what came over from you is always that ambition, always evolving, mentorship, throwing yourself into the industry. What advice would you give to that person who's maybe struggling to find their place in the industry, and they're wondering, is this for me? What would you share with them to maybe help them just get over that difficult barrier and push on in the industry?
I'd say it is about staying open. I think we can get a bit tunnel vision at times, thinking like this is the direction we've got to go in, and if you do that, you can miss out on certain opportunities. So it's just to stay open, stay energized by it, and just do the things that fill you with joy rather than become a chore. I think there's a lot of benefit from, as we were talking about, upskilling. So if there's something you find interesting within in the industry, whether that is learning about scalp health and hair health, or whether it's diving into session styling, there's so much available to us. I think it's, you made a great point. Just find out what feels good to you and immerse yourself in it. And if you do 6 months of it and it doesn't work out, you've got that experience, and that's always going to be valuable. So that'd be my biggest advice.
I just don't feel that there is a reason for anybody with all the knowledge and all the beautiful products and everything that we have at our disposal now to get tired in this industry. I just believe the industry is full of just give yourself 6 months, focus on something, and really get into it. And I promise you, if you do that, it will help you get over the hurdle, and you will end up becoming a rich hairdresser with all that experience. There's no
Yeah,
problem in saying
I
that. And
agree. Yeah,
I'm not saying rich is the answer, but
yeah,
rich in fulfillment, rich in
yes,
rewards, rich in lifestyle, rich in making people happy, and maybe a little bit richer in your back pocket as well, which
nothing
we
wrong
all
with
don't
that.
mind a
Yeah,
bit of that.
yeah, I would 100% agree. Yeah, it's always welcome.
Well, look, Kieran, I want to say thank you so much for bringing such a wonderful story and talking us through it beautifully. And I'm so impressed with what you're doing. Go and check out Centered. Listen, go and find them on Instagram. And I just want to say thank you so much, Kieran. And maybe at some point we could bring you into platform and get a hair loss lesson.
That would be great. 100%. Thanks, Tom. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Likewise. Right, I'm going to. That's absolutely.